The night was quiet and the streets were nearly empty except for the occasional car that drove past. Officer Emily sat in her patrol car with her loyal K-9 partner Max, sitting alertly in the back seat. Emily had always loved these late-night shifts. While most people dreaded the silence of midnight duty, she found peace in it. It was in those calm hours that she could feel the strong bond between her and Max the most. Max was not just a service dog. He was her friend, her shadow, her protector. Wherever she went, he went too. Emily had worked with Max for 4 years, and in that time they had been through many dangerous situations. She often joked with her colleagues that Max had saved her life more times than she could count. In truth, it wasn't really a joke. Max's sharp instincts and quick reactions had pulled her out of danger during drug raids, armed robberies, and even one terrifying night when a suspect had ambushed her from behind. Max was more than a partner. He was family. That night, as Emily drove through the empty streets, she hummed softly to herself. Max perked up his ears at the sound of her voice and let out a low bark as if to answer her. She chuckled and said, "Easy there, buddy. It's just us tonight." Her hand reached back to scratch behind his ear for a second before returning to the wheel. The calm of the night didn't last long. At around midnight, her radio crackled with urgent noise. Dispatch reported a high-speed chase heading her way. A stolen car was racing recklessly down the highway, putting lives in danger. Emily responded immediately, turning on her sirens and heading toward the location. Her heart raced, but her mind stayed sharp. She had trained for moments like this, and she knew Max was ready too. Within minutes, Emily spotted the car. It swerved dangerously from lane to lane, barely missing other vehicles. She activated her siren, signaling the driver to pull over. But instead of stopping, the car accelerated. Emily pressed harder on the gas, staying close behind. The chase grew faster, the streets a blur of lights and shadows. Max barked loudly, sensing the tension and danger. The pursuit moved from the main road into narrower streets where it became even riskier. Suddenly, the suspect swerved sharply to avoid a pedestrian crossing the street. In that moment, Emily made a quick decision. She cut her wheel to protect the civilian, placing her car in the direct path of the suspect. The crash was immediate and brutal. The sound of metal slamming into metal shattered the night, followed by the sharp crack of shattering glass. Emily's body jerked violently as her patrol car was struck. The airbag exploded in front of her, knocking the breath from her lungs. Pain shot through her chest, arms, and legs as the world around her spun. Her head hit the side of the seat and everything blurred. Max howled from the back, his paws scratching against the metal partition as he tried desperately to reach her. The suspect's car screeched to a stop after hitting her vehicle, but instead of checking if she was okay, the driver stumbled out and tried to run. Other officers who had joined the chase quickly tackled him to the ground. Their voices filled the night, shouting commands, calling for medics, and checking on Emily. Inside the crushed patrol car, Emily's vision flickered. She tasted blood on her lips and felt the weight of pain pressing down on her. Her breaths came shallow, each one a battle. But even in that haze, her eyes searched for Max. She could hear his barks, frantic and sharp, full of worry. "Stay. Stay, Max," she whispered weakly, her voice barely audible. She wanted to reassure him even as her own strength faded. Within minutes, paramedics arrived. They carefully pulled her from the wreck, their hands steady but urgent. The night air felt cold against her skin as they placed her on a stretcher. One of the officers held Max back, trying to calm him. But Max resisted, pulling at his leash, whining and crying as he watched Emily being lifted into the ambulance. His eyes never left her, as if he knew something was terribly wrong. Inside the ambulance, Emily drifted in and out of consciousness. The paramedics worked quickly, securing IV lines, checking her vitals, and giving her oxygen. They spoke to her, trying to keep her awake, but her mind swam between darkness and faint awareness. Through it all, only one thought pushed its way through her foggy mind. Max. She wanted to see him. She needed to know he was okay. At the hospital, doctors rushed her into the emergency room. They fought to stabilize her, their faces set with focus and determination. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, and severe bruising were discovered almost immediately. It was clear she was in critical condition. The room was filled with the beeping of machines, the shuffle of nurses' feet, and the calm but urgent voices of the medical team. Meanwhile, Max was taken to the police station by Emily's colleagues. But he was not calm, not even for a moment. He barked at the kennel walls, scratched at the door, and refused to eat. He paced back and forth, his eyes darting toward the door each time he heard a sound. The officers who knew Max well shook their heads sadly. They could see his heart was breaking because he didn't understand why his partner had left him. As dawn began to rise, Emily lay in the intensive care unit, her body hooked up to wires and machines. She was alive, but barely. The doctors worked tirelessly, but they knew her fight was only beginning. In the silence of the ICU, her lips moved faintly. The nurse leaning close could just make out the words, "Max. Please, bring me Max." The nurse blinked in surprise. Of all the things Emily could have asked for in that fragile state, it was not medicine, not family, not even her own comfort. It was her dog. Her voice was weak, but the plea carried a weight that struck the nurse deeply. Back at the station, Max continued to howl into the early morning. His cries echoed through the building, a sound filled with worry and longing. Everyone who heard him knew that something powerful connected him to Emily, something stronger than duty, stronger than training. It was love, loyalty, and a bond that could not be broken. That night, a dedicated officer had fallen in the line of duty, and her faithful dog waited desperately for her return. No one yet knew how far that bond would go, or how Max's presence would change everything in the days to come. But for now, Emily lay in her hospital bed, broken but still holding on, and Max waited for the chance to be by her side again. The hours after the accident were heavy and filled with uncertainty. Emily was in the intensive care unit fighting for her life. Machines beeped steadily around her, each sound reminding everyone how close she was to the edge. The doctors had done their best in surgery, repairing the internal bleeding and stabilizing her broken ribs, but they all knew the danger wasn't over. She would need to fight through the critical hours, and only time would tell if she had the strength. Emily's body was weak, but her mind still drifted in and out of awareness. Every time her eyes fluttered open, the bright lights of the ICU greeted her. Nurses hovered nearby, checking her vitals, adjusting her oxygen, and making sure she was stable. But Emily's lips moved with the same words again and again. "Where's Max, please? I want Max." Her voice was faint, almost broken, yet filled with determination. It surprised the medical staff because patients in such conditions rarely spoke so clearly about what they wanted. One nurse leaned close to her and said gently, "Officer, you need to rest. You're safe now." But Emily's gaze shifted weakly and her hand twitched as if trying to reach out. "My dog," she whispered. The nurse felt her throat tighten. She knew this officer was battling for her life, but her heart and thoughts were only with her partner. Back at the police station, Max's behavior was becoming more difficult for the officers to handle. The usually disciplined K9 was now restless, pacing non-stop in his kennel. He barked whenever someone walked by as if demanding to know where Emily was. When one officer tried to calm him with food, Max turned his head away. He refused water, refused play, refused everything. His ears stayed perked toward the entrance of the station, waiting for the sound of Emily's footsteps that never came. The K9 unit captain, a man named Sergeant Miller, watched Max with concern. He had seen strong bonds between handlers and their dogs before, but this was different. Max wasn't just trained to work with Emily, he was deeply attached to her. Miller rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "He knows. He can feel it." He understood that dogs had instincts far beyond what humans could measure. As morning turned into afternoon, Emily's condition remained fragile. Her vital signs were unstable, sometimes dipping so low that alarms went off. The doctors would rush to adjust her medications or give her oxygen. Her family had been called to the hospital, and they sat in the waiting room with worried faces. Her mother wiped tears from her cheeks, whispering prayers under her breath. Her father sat silently, his jaw clenched, his eyes red. When the family was finally allowed a short visit, they were shocked by what they saw. Emily looked pale, her body covered in wires and tubes. Yet when she opened her eyes briefly and saw them, her lips moved with the same words. "Where's Max?" Her mother cried harder, leaning closer. "Sweetheart, you need to rest." "We're here with you." But Emily shook her head weakly. "Max, please." "I want Max." The doctors exchanged looks. They understood that her emotional state was unusual. Most patients begged for less pain, for water, or simply drifted without speaking. But this officer's entire focus was on her dog. A senior doctor, Dr. Patel, spoke quietly to the family afterward. "Her bond with that dog is strong. It could be the thing keeping her conscious, keeping her fighting." Meanwhile, Max had grown more frantic. He scratched at the metal bars of his kennel until his paws bled slightly. Officers tried taking him outside for walks, but he pulled hard in the direction of the hospital, as if he knew where Emily was. "It's like he can sense her," one officer said, shaking his head in disbelief. That evening, Sergeant Miller made a decision. He drove to the hospital to speak with the administration. He explained the situation. Emily was not just any patient. She was an officer who had risked her life to save others, and her partner was suffering too. He requested that Max be allowed to visit her in the ICU. The hospital staff were hesitant. "We can't allow animals into the intensive care unit," one administrator said firmly. "There are infection risks, safety issues, and strict policies." Miller argued, "This is not just a dog. He's a trained canine, disciplined and loyal. Emily's asking for him again and again. If she loses hope, her body might not hold on. Letting Max see her might be the one thing that helps her heal." The debate grew tense. Some doctors sided with Miller, understanding the psychological benefit of animals for patients. Others shook their heads, insisting it was impossible. In the ICU, Emily's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. Her blood pressure dropped dangerously, alarms rang out, and the staff rushed to save her. Through the chaos, she whispered the same word: "Max." One nurse who had been caring for her since the accident was deeply moved. She later told the head doctor, "I've never seen anything like this. She doesn't even ask about herself. She only wants her dog. It's giving her a reason to fight." Back at the station, Max howled into the night. His voice was haunting, filled with sorrow. Every officer who heard it felt a chill. One whispered, "It's like he knows she's slipping away." None of them could calm him. They all understood that something powerful was happening, something beyond rules and logic. At the hospital, the administrators finally agreed to discuss a compromise. They considered bringing Max into a restricted area under strict control. The idea was met with both hope and hesitation. Infection control specialists warned about the risks, but others pointed out that the ICU had made exceptions before, under extraordinary circumstances. And if ever there was an extraordinary case, it was this one. While the debate continued, Emily opened her eyes again. Her breathing was shallow and her body was weak, but she tried to speak. A nurse bent down close and heard her faint voice. "Tell them, I can't fight." "Without Max?" Tears filled the nurse's eyes. She held Emily's hand gently and whispered, "We're trying. Just hold on a little longer." The night dragged on, with doctors watching her closely, worried she might not make it until morning. In another part of the city, Max lay restlessly in his kennel, refusing to sleep. His eyes fixed on the door as if waiting for the moment he would be called. The bond between Emily and her dog had become more than just a partnership. It was a lifeline. Emily's body was broken, but her spirit clung to one thing only: the need to see Max again. And though no one could predict it, that need was about to push the hospital to make a decision that would change everything. The morning sun rose over the hospital, but inside the ICU there was no sense of peace. Emily's condition had become a matter of worry for every doctor and nurse on her team. Her body had been stabilized after surgery, but her recovery was not moving forward. Her blood pressure stayed low, her oxygen levels were unstable, and her heart rate was unpredictable. Every time she stirred, her lips formed the same words: "Max, bring me Max." Those pleas echoed in the minds of everyone caring for her. In the police station, Max had still not calmed down. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of rest and his body shook with restlessness. He barked whenever someone entered the room, hoping it was Emily. The officers who cared for him were beginning to feel helpless. They had seen many canine dogs become loyal to their handlers, but Max's behavior was beyond anything they had witnessed before. He was not just missing her, he was grieving as if she were already gone. Sergeant Miller returned to the hospital later that day, holding a folder filled with Emily's records. He met with Dr. Patel, the senior doctor overseeing her case, and the hospital administrators. His voice was steady but full of urgency. "You don't understand what this means," he told them. "Emily isn't just another patient. She's an officer who risked her life to protect civilians. Her dog isn't just a pet. He's her partner. If we deny her this one request, we might be denying her the will to survive." The administrator shook his head, pointing to the rules. "The ICU is a sterile environment. Animals are not allowed inside for very good reasons. Patients here are in critical condition. We can't risk infections or accidents. Miller leaned forward, his eyes hard. This is not about rules. This is about life. Emily's mind is focused on one thing only: her dog. If you can't see that this is more important than paperwork, then you're not looking at the whole picture. Sometimes healing doesn't just come from medicine. Sometimes it comes from the heart. Dr. Patel listened carefully. He had seen Emily whisper her dog's name even while sedated. He had also seen the way her vital signs improved slightly whenever she thought she was being reassured about Max. After a long silence, he said, "What if we allow the dog in under strict supervision? The visit would be short, only a few minutes. The dog would need to be cleaned before entry, and we would restrict his movement. But if it gives her the strength to fight, then maybe it's worth it." The administrator looked uneasy but didn't immediately refuse. It would be an exception. This hospital has never done anything like this before. Miller nodded firmly. Then let this be the first time. The debate stretched into the afternoon. Infection control specialists were consulted and arguments went back and forth. Some staff said it was too dangerous. Others, especially the nurses who had been caring for Emily, argued that the risk was small compared to what was at stake. One young nurse finally spoke up with tears in her eyes. Every time she opens her eyes, she doesn't ask for water or pain relief. She only asks for Max. If her will to live depends on him, then denying that could be what kills her. The weight of her words hung heavy in the room. At last, Dr. Patel decided to take responsibility.
"I'll sign the authorization," he said.
"But only under strict rules. The dog will be cleaned and examined by a vet first. He will be allowed into the ICU for just a few minutes, with protective coverings on the floor, and he must remain at her side only." When Miller heard this, he felt relief for the first time in days. He called the station immediately and told them to prepare Max. Officers at the station were stunned. "They're really letting him in?" one of them asked in disbelief. "Yes," Miller replied. "But we have to follow the rules. This has to be done carefully." Later that evening, a vet examined Max, making sure he was clean and healthy. His fur was brushed, his paws were wiped, and he was fitted with a special protective vest. Through it all, Max remained restless, his eyes searching constantly for Emily. It was as if he knew that the moment he had been waiting for was finally close. At the hospital, the news spread quickly among the staff. Some shook their heads, still uneasy about the decision, but many others smiled, touched by the idea. The ICU nurses prepared Emily's room, laying down protective sheets and clearing space near her bed. They whispered to one another, "I hope this works. She needs him." As night approached, the plan was set. Emily was weak, drifting between sleep and shallow consciousness. The monitors beside her bed beeped softly, reflecting her fragile state. She whispered again, "Max." Her mother, sitting nearby, stroked her hand and said gently, "He's coming, sweetheart. Just hold on." Outside the ICU, Max arrived with Sergeant Miller and 2 other officers. The moment the hospital doors opened, Max's body grew tense, his nose twitching as he caught Emily's scent. His nails clicked against the polished floor as he pulled forward, eager to find her. The officers had to hold him back gently, reminding him to stay calm. Nurses and doctors gathered quietly in the hallway, curious to see what would happen. Some carried clipboards, ready to monitor Emily's vitals during the visit. Others simply wanted to witness the moment. There was a sense that something important, something almost sacred, was about to take place. The ICU doors slid open, and Max was finally led inside. His head lifted, his ears perked, and his eyes scanned the room. Then, as if guided by instinct, he locked onto the bed where Emily lay. Without hesitation, he pulled forward, moving straight to her side. The officers loosened his leash, and Max pressed his nose gently against Emily's hand. For the first time in days, Emily stirred with more energy. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw him, her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Max," she whispered, her voice cracked but full of love. Her hand trembled as she lifted it toward him. Max leaned closer, pressing his head into her palm, his tail wagging slowly as if afraid to hurt her. The room fell silent. Doctors, nurses, and family all watched with wide eyes. On the monitor beside her bed, Emily's heart rate began to stabilize. Her blood pressure, which had been dangerously low, started to rise. Her oxygen levels improved steadily. It was as if the presence of her dog had breathed life back into her body. Dr. Patel blinked in shock. "Look at the monitor," he whispered. "It's changing. She's responding." The other doctors leaned in, astonished. None of their medicines or machines had achieved such results. Yet here was a dog, with nothing but love and loyalty, sparking a change they could not explain. Emily's mother covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. Her father, usually a man of few words, whispered softly, "It's a miracle." Max refused to leave her side. He rested his head gently on her arm, his eyes watching her closely as if promising her that he would never let go again. Emily, weak but comforted, let out a soft sigh. "I can fight now," she whispered, barely audible. But everyone in the room heard the power behind those words. For years, hospitals had debated the role of animals in healing. But that night in one ICU room, every witness realized something important. Love can do what medicine sometimes cannot. Emily's bond with Max had become the force pulling her back from the edge of death. And while her battle was far from over, for the first time since the accident, there was hope. The ICU room had never felt so alive. For days, the sound of machines and the quiet whispers of nurses had been the only signs of life. But now, with Max by Emily's side, everything felt different. The loyal dog stood tall beside her bed, his body still but his eyes wide and alert. He pressed his head gently against her arm, refusing to move away. The sight was powerful, an injured officer holding on to life and her faithful partner refusing to leave her. The doctors who had gathered in the room watched the monitors with disbelief. Emily's heart rate, which had been unsteady, was now showing a regular rhythm. Her blood pressure had risen to safer levels. Even her oxygen saturation, which had worried the staff all day, was improving. Nurses exchanged looks, shaking their heads in amazement. No amount of medicine had managed to achieve this sudden stability. Emily opened her eyes slowly. Her vision was blurred, but she could see the familiar shape of her dog standing beside her. A weak smile touched her lips as she whispered, "Max, you found me." Her hand trembled as she tried to stroke his fur. Max leaned closer, pressing his nose into her palm, his tail giving a small wag. The bond between them was clear, deep, and unbreakable. Her mother, standing at the foot of the bed, began to cry softly. She had prayed for a sign that her daughter would pull through, and now she believed she was seeing it. Her father stood silently, his large hand resting against the wall, his eyes fixed on his daughter and the dog. The sight broke through his usually hard expression, and for the first time he let a tear fall. The room was filled with silence except for the soft beeping of machines. But in that silence, everyone could feel something powerful happening. It was as if Max's presence had lit a fire inside Emily, reminding her body and mind that she still had a reason to fight. Her lips moved again, forming words that were almost too soft to hear. "Don't leave me, Max." One of the nurses wiped her eyes quietly. She had seen many patients in critical condition, but this moment felt different. She whispered to Dr. Patel, "I think she's holding on for him. He's giving her strength." Dr. Patel nodded slowly, his eyes still on the monitor. "Sometimes medicine is not enough," he replied. "Sometimes the will to live is stronger than anything we can give. And right now that dog is giving her a reason." Max stayed completely still, as if he understood how fragile Emily was. He didn't jump or bark. He simply rested his head on her arm, his eyes never leaving her face. His breathing matched hers, calm and steady, almost as though he was guiding her back to life. Minutes passed and the monitors continued to show steady improvement. Emily's chest rose and fell more smoothly. Her color, though still pale, was a little better. Everyone in the room could feel the weight lifting, if only slightly. The administrators who had objected to Max's visit stood quietly at the back, unable to deny what they were witnessing. Rules and policies suddenly felt small compared to the living proof in front of them. One of them whispered under his breath, "Maybe we've underestimated what a bond like this can do." As the minutes stretched on, Emily's eyes stayed on Max. Her hand, though weak, managed to curl slightly into his fur. "Good boy," she whispered, her lips trembling. "You stayed with me," Max responded with a quiet whine, his eyes glistening as if he understood every word. After about 15 minutes, the doctors agreed that Max should be taken out of the ICU so Emily could rest. But when the officers gently tried to lead him away, Max refused to move. He planted his paws firmly on the ground, his eyes fixed on Emily. The leash tightened, but he would not step away from her side. Emily, though barely awake, seemed to sense what was happening. She whispered, "Let him stay. Please." Dr. Patel looked at her, then at the staff, and finally nodded. "We'll allow him to stay for tonight," he said. "If it helps her recover, then it's worth it." The nurses quickly arranged a soft mat beside the bed, and Max lay down on it. He curled up close enough to keep his head resting against Emily's arm. Once he settled there, he didn't move again. His eyes stayed half open, watching every shift of her body, every sound she made. That night, for the first time since the accident, Emily slept peacefully. Her body, though weak, seemed to relax. Her breathing steadied and the monitor showed signs of progress. The staff checked on her throughout the night, but each time they found Max still at her side, keeping watch like a silent guardian. Word of what happened in the ICU began to spread through the hospital. Staff members from other floors came quietly to see the unusual sight. A police K9 inside the ICU, lying faithfully beside his injured handler. Some shook their heads in disbelief while others smiled, touched by the devotion they were witnessing. By morning, Emily showed noticeable improvement. Her blood pressure had stabilized more, and her oxygen levels were better than the night before. She opened her eyes more often, and when she did, she always looked at Max first. Each time she saw him, her lips curved into a weak smile, and her fingers reached for his fur. Her family was overjoyed. Her mother whispered to the dog, "You saved her. We could not reach her, but you did." Even her father, who had been a man of strong silence all his life, crouched down beside Max and gently patted his head. "Good boy," he said softly. Max looked up at him, his eyes shining, before returning his gaze to Emily. The doctors could not deny the evidence. While medicine and surgery had kept her alive, it was clear that Max's presence was driving her recovery forward. She was fading before, one nurse said. But when he came, everything changed. It's like she found her reason again. Over the next few days, Max was allowed short visits in the ICU each morning and evening. Each time, Emily's vitals showed improvement. Her progress was slow but steady. The hospital staff, who had once argued against his presence, now looked forward to his visits. Some even admitted that they were inspired by the bond they had seen. Emily herself grew stronger with each visit. Her voice, though still soft, gained more clarity. She began speaking more often, not just to Max, but to her parents and nurses. But every conversation started or ended with her turning toward her dog. "I'm fighting because you're here," she whispered to him one night. Max responded with a gentle whine and pressed closer to her side. Doctors, nurses, and even administrators who had once doubted now found themselves in awe. The ICU, a place usually filled with sorrow and fear, had become a place of hope because of a single dog's love. Everyone who stepped into that room left with the same thought. They had witnessed something extraordinary. For Emily, the journey was not over. Her body still carried deep injuries and her recovery would be long and painful, but she no longer faced it alone. With Max beside her, she had the strength to keep going. Each time her body felt too weak, her heart reminded her that Max was waiting for her to return fully. And so the ICU became the stage for a quiet miracle. A woman who had been slipping away found her way back because of her dog's loyalty. And a dog who had refused to give up on his partner showed the world what love and devotion could truly accomplish. The days that followed were filled with cautious hope. Emily's body remained fragile, but each sunrise brought a little more strength. Every morning the nurses checked her vitals, and every morning they found her slightly stronger than the day before. They wrote careful notes in her chart, recording the gradual improvements. Her blood pressure was better, her breathing steadier, and her responses sharper. For a patient who had been so close to death, these small steps were miracles. And everyone knew that Max was the reason. Max's visits became the highlight of her recovery. The hospital had set strict rules, but no one complained anymore. The ICU staff prepared eagerly each time he was brought in, some even smiling as they watched the reunion. Max always walked straight to Emily's bed, ignoring everyone else. His eyes softened as soon as he saw her, and his tail wagged gently. He would rest his head on her arm or chest, and Emily would stroke his fur with weak fingers. It was their ritual, and with each visit she grew stronger. Her parents never stopped thanking the doctors for bending the rules. Her mother often said through tears, "You didn't just save her life with surgery. You saved it again when you let Max in." Her father, though quieter, showed his gratitude in his own way. One morning he stood outside the ICU and told Sergeant Miller, "That dog is a hero. He deserves a medal as much as she does." Miller nodded, knowing the truth of those words. The story of Emily and Max began to spread beyond the hospital walls. First, it reached other officers in the police department. They came to visit, standing outside the glass of the ICU to see their colleague resting with her loyal partner by her side. Then local reporters heard about it. Soon the newspapers carried headlines about the critically injured officer who pleaded for her dog, and how his presence shocked doctors with the impact it had on her recovery. Strangers began sending flowers and letters to the hospital. Some wrote messages of support for Emily, thanking her for her bravery. Others sent treats and toys for Max, calling him a hero dog. Nurses placed the letters and gifts around her room so Emily could see them when she opened her eyes. She was moved by the outpouring of kindness. "All because of Max," she whispered one afternoon. "He gave me back my strength, and now people believe in us too." Her progress, though slow, never stopped. After 2 weeks in the ICU, the doctors finally agreed she was stable enough to be moved to a recovery ward. It was a major step. The day she was wheeled out of the ICU, Max walked proudly beside her bed. Nurses and doctors gathered in the hallway, clapping softly as she passed. Many had been part of her struggle, and seeing her alive and awake filled them with joy. Emily lifted her hand weakly in thanks, but her eyes never left Max. In the recovery ward, Max was allowed to visit more often. Emily began physical therapy, relearning how to move her injured body. It was painful and exhausting, but whenever she felt she couldn't continue, she thought of Max. The therapist sometimes brought him into the room, and his presence pushed her to take one more step, to lift herself one more time, to keep going even when the pain was sharp. She whispered to him during those sessions, "For you, Max, I'll keep fighting." The bond between them became an inspiration not only to the hospital, but also to the community. Local television covered the story, showing clips of Emily sitting up in bed with Max beside her. People across the city began talking about the miracle of loyalty and love they had witnessed. Donations poured in for the K9 unit, with many people writing that they had been moved by Max's devotion. Weeks later, Emily was finally ready to leave the hospital. The doctors, nurses, and staff gathered once again to say goodbye. She was still weak, leaning on crutches, but she stood tall, her police uniform draped neatly over her shoulders. Max stood beside her, alert and proud, wearing a special vest that read "Hero." Her parents stood close, their faces glowing with pride and relief. As she walked out of the hospital doors, reporters and cameras were waiting. But Emily's focus was only on Max. She bent down slowly, ignoring the flash of cameras, and wrapped her arms around him. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "You saved me, Max. I wouldn't be here without you." The crowd watching fell silent at the emotional moment. The police department later held a ceremony to honor both Emily and Max. Officers lined up in dress uniforms, saluting as she walked into the hall with her dog by her side. The chief of police spoke about her bravery the night of the accident, and about the extraordinary bond that had helped her survive. This officer gave her body to protect others, and this dog gave his heart to bring her back. Together they remind us of what true loyalty means. Max was awarded a Medal of Honor, which was attached proudly to his vest. When Emily pinned it there, Max wagged his tail happily, unaware of the meaning, but understanding that it was a moment of pride. Emily received a standing ovation, but she quickly raised her hand and said softly, "This is not my award alone. It belongs to Max, too. He is the reason I'm standing here today." From that day forward, Emily and Max became symbols of hope in their community. Schools invited them to visit, where children listened wide-eyed as Emily told the story of how Max stayed by her side. Hospitals invited them to speak about the healing power of animals. Even strangers on the street recognized them, often stopping to say thank you. But for Emily, the greatest reward was simpler. It was waking up each morning and seeing Max beside her, his eyes filled with the same devotion as the night of the accident. She knew her recovery was far from complete. She would carry scars and pain for the rest of her life, but she also knew that as long as Max was with her, she would never face another battle alone. The memory of the ICU never left her. Sometimes late at night, she would close her eyes and remember the moment Max pressed his head against her arm and pulled her back from the edge of death. That memory gave her peace. It reminded her that love and loyalty could defy even the darkest odds. In the end, the story of the critically injured officer and her loyal dog was not just about survival. It was about the power of trust, the strength of a bond that no rules or walls could break, and the miracle that can happen when two hearts refuse to let go of each other. Emily's life had been saved not just by medicine, but by the unwavering love of her partner. And Max, the dog who never gave up, proved to the world that sometimes the greatest healer walks on four paws.